Congressional Republicans may have a majority, but that doesn't mean that they have unity. In an interview with Punchbowl News, Democratic Congressman Brad Schneider argued that Republicans will have to go to, quote, the furthest extremes to satisfy the Freedom Caucus. And because their majority is razor thin, that could give Democrats a window to swoop in and advance their interests, especially if Republicans in swing states refuse to get on board. For more, I want to bring in Maria Urbina, former senior advisor to Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. She is now the managing director of the Indivisible Project. And John Allen is still with us. Okay, John, first to you. What are you hearing on the Hill, honey? Is the margin is going to be tight, potentially tighter than what it was the last Congress. And this Congress, Democrats are going to have to make a decision. All that help they gave Republicans in governing didn't necessarily help them at the ballot box in November. So what now?
No, it certainly did not. And I think, look, the Democrats obviously don't run the House. And I think they're going to want to make that very clear to the American public. There is going to be overreach by President-elect Trump when he takes office. There's going to be overreach by the House Republican majority. There is going to be, as Congressman Schneider said, efforts from the right wing in the caucus, the Freedom Caucus, to take down the leadership, whether if actually to oust the leadership or simply to stop what they're trying to get done. And then there's still a handful of moderate Republicans in the House. So between all that, Speaker Mike Johnson's got a real tough task ahead of him. And the Democrats, I think, are probably going to want to largely just get out of the way and watch the Republicans kind of stab each other for a while.
I mean, Maria, what is that what's going to happen here? Because, look, we've seen a lot of headlines, and I've talked to a lot of Democrats, and deflated is a word that comes to mind when speaking to my Democratic friends. I think there's a temptation for folks to believe, look, MAGA won. This is what people wanted. Democrats are just going to have to wait 2 years and then see what they can scrounge up in the midterms. But, you know, you all are on the ground talking to folks, but Indivisible, the folks who lead it, you all also come from Congress, and you were the staffers working behind the scenes to make the things happen. So what do Democrats do, and what can they do, and what are the plans? Tell us all. Just spill it on the table.
Well, here's the plan. So one, I just want to say that we've heard from 40,000 people within days of the election.
40,000.
So 40,000 people showed up to talk to us, to make meaning of this moment, to say, like, I'm not going anywhere. That doesn't mean that there are going to be people who are tired and who are going to say, you know what, I need to take a beat right now. But we are replenishing folks who need to take a pause with thousands of new people. So that's one. 40,000 new activists showed up to an Indivisible call to process what was next. Two, we had, of that 40,000, 10,000 who raised their hand and said, I want to start an indivisible group or join one that exists. Those are massive numbers. So when I see that, I'm just sort of like, listen, we can all sort of be on different diss tracks about what the future of the Dem Party is. What I'd like to focus on is how do we make meaning of this moment and not lose all of these folks to despair? Because we have to have organizing vehicles. We can't protect our folks federally from everything. Mm-hmm. There are going to be majorities. We cannot underestimate what's coming.
John, 40,000 is a lot of people.
And
it's a lot of people.
And let's be clear that we're not going to be able to win fights every time. But when we got in the ring around the ACA and said, we are not doing this, that mattered.
Okay, so what do you want to jump in?
I just want to jump in and just say, like, look, the Democratic Party for the last 8 years has been an anti-Trump coalition. And I think being anti-Trump and having that the center of the Democratic Party has been problematic for the Democratic Party in terms of advancing its own agenda, in terms of having that leadership out there. I think that was a problem for the Biden campaign when it was the Biden campaign, looking forward to and trying to get voters to get on board for 2024, and continue to be a problem for Vice President Harris when she took the reins of the party. That basically, if your coalition is not Donald Trump, you get everybody from AOC and Bernie Sanders
to Dick Cheney.
Yes. And that's not. There's no ideological coherence there. There's really nothing that they overlap on except for the defense of democracy.
But I think the reality is that the Democratic Party, I mean, the difference about the Democratic Party apparatus and the Republican Party apparatus is the Democratic Party apparatus, the tent is large, okay? Now, I don't know if it's Dick Cheney large. I think that was specific to this last election. But the tent is large. So it's, and there is vast ideological difference. And so, I mean, that's a challenge, frankly, for the party apparatus. It has been for a while, but I also perhaps it's an opportunity. You've got these 40,000 people that showed up, the 10,000 people that raised their hand to start stuff in their cities, groups in their cities.
Yep.
What specifically can the people organize around, though? And because if Leader Hakeem Jeffries were sitting here, he'd say, well, the Democrats in Congress have been specific on issues, but that's, again, the brand issue of Democratic apparatus. Who is in charge? Depends on who you're listening to.
Well, federally, I think it's true that we're going to need to make sure that we do as much harm mitigation as possible. And it's not to say we're going to be able to do everything and fight every fight. And just to your point, like, we have learned from that era of, like, we're going to have some discipline about you can't chase down every fight. But not sitting and doing anything or saying only politicians have the answers right now, I think is extremely short-sighted and is largely speaking from places that don't understand. Like, I'm the daughter of factory workers. Like, my inputs are not priors that I've made through movement work, through my work in the Senate. My priors are like, what do people need right now to feel a sense of relief, to not be suffering? How does that inform how I organize? Not because I think we've gotten everything right, and we have learned. Like, we're going to have to go to blue states and blue cities and make sure that they're doing things. And we're seeing folks do that already. We're hearing Democratic governors say, hey, you need to Trump-proof your state because you just can't come and get our people without a fight. You're hearing folks like Aaron Ford in Nevada, the attorney general there, talk about how, like, hey, every Nevadan in this state has rights. And so you just can't cede all that ground is all I'm saying. And instead of getting into the gutter with folks, I think it's important to have organizing vehicles so we don't lose people right
To be
away.
for something is what I hear her saying, John. And I do think that a number of the Democrats I've spoken to, and even some Republicans, that say, hey, in places where Democrats did well, it's because they were very clear about what their messaging was, what they were for. The people in those districts knew them well. And in places where Democrats this past cycle didn't do as well, they weren't as clear. But what does this mean for Congress going forward?
Well, look, for Congress, I think that, and particularly the Democrats in Congress, they are a place to have a platform to talk about the issues, whether they're the big macro issues, whether the economy and inflation, tariffs, immigration, to have that platform.
Housing.
But I think that there is a real need on the part of the Democratic Party to get back in touch with its grassroots and to get some ideas coming up from the bottom to the top, because obviously the top has not been doing a great job of figuring out what's going on the bottom. There's a lot of ideological causes in Washington that don't really connect with the pocketbook of the average person sitting at their kitchen table.
As I like to say, not enough people. I can tell who's actually going to the Costco, honey, and who is Instacarting their groceries.